Hey everyone, Coach and Hoka athlete Sage Canaday here with a training talk analysis, so to speak, of the U.S. men's or U.S. Olympic trials, men's and women's U.S. Olympic trials marathon standards just released today for 2024. This is for the Olympic trials. They've lowered the times, and that's what we're going to get into. But first of all, a little bit of context, a little bit of bias. Olympic trials, I know it's something that a lot of countries don't have. You select maybe the top three men and women in your country, and they get to go to the Olympics, or they have to run under 2:12 for the men, or 2:32 for the women, or something like that. And so sometimes it gets political. In the US, though, we do a very special thing where once every 4 years, usually about 6 months or sometime in the winter before the Olympic Games, we have one race where the nation's best get together on one day, one course, and race each other, and the top three finishers usually make the Olympic team. Now I say usually because you still have to run a pretty fast time, usually under the Olympic standard of 2:15 for men, and I believe I'll have to put what the women's one is there, maybe 2:32. And that has, on really bad hot weather days, that's been the case where maybe only one person qualified. But usually it's top three. And it's a dream come true for a lot of people, and a really good national class, sub-elite type of pie in the sky type of goal, lifetime goal for a lot of people, including myself over the years. Because it's like, you qualify for Boston or you qualify for New York, which is a great goal for a lot of people. Then it's like, what's the next step? Or if you're a pretty good college runner in the US NCAA system and you're looking to run pro or semi-pro or try to make that next step, making the Olympic trials is a huge deal. For me personally, it was like making my Olympics because I knew I wasn't good enough to actually make the Olympic team. But I digress there. And, I'll admit my bias. I'm a guy, so I'm used to the guys' standards and numbers. And we're going to talk about the women's standard because it's what really dropped significantly. And it's caused some debate, so to speak, I guess, online. That's why I'm doing this video. But, for me, it was that big goal. And I've watched the time standards lower over the years. I've also seen new technologies like super shoes with carbon fiber and special foams, which we'll get into as well. That's important. But, my personal bias, my personal story, I ran, in high school, I ran a half marathon in 1:13. I was like, oh, if you get this half under 1:10, maybe you could run a 2:20 marathon eventually and qualify for the trials. And when I was in 2007, when I was in college, that window opened up and you only had to run under 2:22 for men. And it was a lot easier, I'll tell you that. And I actually qualified by the skin of my teeth at the Grandma's Marathon on a hot day. I snuck under by 13 with 13 seconds to spare, and ran that qualifying time, qualified for my first Olympic trials when I was 21 years old. That was in New York City in 2007 before the 2008 trials. Then I was able to do it again, running pro for Hanson's Brooks in 2012. They lowered the men's standard to 2:19. You had to run under 2:19 to hit the A standard, which was the B standard, which was great because they gave you support. They gave you travel support. You had elite fluid bottles. In that race, and these numbers are important, in 2012 trials, only 85 guys were in the race. Only 85 guys finished who had run under 2:19. A lot of guys qualified with the half marathon standard, which we're not going to talk about as much because it's gotten way faster. But for women in 2012, there were 152 women in the 2012 U.S. Olympic Trials Marathon, and the standard was 2:46 for women. So, it was great to be part of that. Those are some of the best memories of my life. You're one step away from making the Olympics, something I'm really proud of, and something that I've tried to do again and again in 2016 and 2020, ultimately missing by less than a minute. I missed by 12 seconds in 2016, and then again in 2020, missing by 50 seconds. But the men's standard stayed the same throughout that period. 2012 to 2016 to 2020, it was 2:19. Now, briefly, before in 2015, they actually said 2:18 for the men, sub 2:18. And these are on standard courses. You can't run a massive downhill race and have it count. It's got to be a pretty legit course. CIM and Boston still count, even though they're point to point, but it can't be a massive downhill. The number of qualifiers we see has gone up, though, for the men. For just looking at the men's finishers, in 2016 there were 108 men. Now super shoes are coming out, right? But I thought in 2015 I had to run under 218, and that's why at Boston that year I paced myself for a sub 218. At CIM I went out in 107 because I thought I had to run under 218 that day. Little did I know they would change it back to 219 and people would qualify retroactively for the men. For the women's, they did lower it though. For the 2016 trials, they lowered it to 245. Now there were still 149 finishers for the women in that race and slightly more qualifiers. I'm just going by the finisher results since those are archived. So still more women than men qualifying in 2012 with the 245 faster time. Fast forward to 2020. The 2020 Olympic trials, right before COVID really hit hard, they had the race. There were over 512 women that qualified for the 2020 Olympic trials, and this time was still a sub 245. Now, why did this happen? 260 men qualified, and the numbers retrospectively for who actually ran in the race was 465 for women and 243 for men. I think it was the super shoe influence. A lot of it that's the biggest influx of technological development in running shoe technology throughout the history of time. The super shoe definitely made a difference, and that's why you see that influx. I would also admit that American marathon running in general at the national class level has gotten deeper. There are more sponsorship opportunities, more post-collegiate clubs, more people get motivated with social media, more buzz around the Olympic trials. So, you have that effect as well. Not going to take that one out. Back in the 90s, things were looking pretty dire for U.S. Distance running. And so we've made a lot of progress there. We're still not nearly as deep, though, as a country like Japan or, of course, Kenya and Ethiopia. So, keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. So now for 2024, the USATF, USA National Federation, basically, USAT Track and Field, announced that for the 2024 trials, the window will open in January of 2022, but for the 2024 Olympic team selection, you have to run under 218 if you're a guy, and now under 237 for women, which is a huge drop, right? Dropping 8 minutes down. And it would, if you go by the numbers, a lot of women qualified in that, 245 to 240 type of range, hundreds of women. So 237, a lot more of an elite time. Now, that's what caused some of the outrage, I think, was the idea that a lot of women might not be able to run under 237, and it takes away that goal, and it takes away some of the community aspect, so to speak. Because what you have with Olympic trials is you have people that work full-time jobs that have families, people that, the local teacher that trains before and after school running 100 miles a week, and qualifies and is one step away from making Olympics. It's a great story. It's a great motivator. And, coming from that background, or not working full time, but coming from that background of having it be a lifetime goal, I understand the power of it and how it makes you feel good, and it's good for the sport. At the same time, I do feel like you have to limit the field size maybe to some extent, because you could give more support to, let's say, the top 150 or top 200 runners in the country. If they got free travel, free hotel, elite fluid bottles in this special race, they'd get a higher level of support. Whereas if you have over 500 qualifiers in the Olympic trials, they might not give fluid bottles to everyone or pay for their travel, lodging, and it's an expensive trip to go out and cover. And a lot of these runners, they work really hard, sacrifice a lot to qualify for this dream. How special do you want to be? Some people said they got tripped up in the last trials. A lot of these people are used to running big city marathons and placing, in the top 20 or top 30 of a major marathon, but you usually get more spread out. Whereas this is a very dense pack usually of runners, especially the sub-elites running between 212 and 218 for men and, 235 and 245 for women. You might be in a pack actually the whole way, which is a rare experience for someone that fast usually if they were in like a smaller marathon or even getting more spread out in a major. So, the argument I see goes both ways. At the same time, I do think U.S. women will rise to the occasion and more will qualify and run in the 230s and could possibly run under that 237. And whether or not they outnumber men or not, I don't know. It's a tough comparison game to play. Traditionally, like I said, over the years, there have been more women in the Olympic trials. Women usually have more of an age spread as well. All the guys I used to know who qualified for the Olympic trials were really good college runners. A lot of them ran Division I. A lot of them were not just college runners, but they were good college runners. To run under 219, especially before super shoes were out, not very many guys did it, and that's why there were only 85 guys in the 2012 Olympic trials, but still over 150 women. So should the standards come down? Are they gender equivalent, so to speak? I think they're closer now, to tell you the truth. I think, if you look at the world records for the top men, top women in the world, the spread is a little bit tighter. Whereas if you're going from like 219 to 245, that's a pretty big spread, even between men and women. So should it be 237? I don't know. How many numbers are going to qualify? I don't know. I think there's a certain threshold where there's a certain sweet spot for the Olympic trials that makes it really special. So, over 100 is good. Over 300, it starts getting a little crowded maybe. Some people say we should open up the doors and have it be 1,000, or maybe we could just go by a sheer ranking and have, the top 500, whatever time you have, that's who's qualified. I don't like that moving target because someone could displace you last minute. So I do like the time standards and the time goals. I think they're fair. Some people say we should just do away with the whole Olympic trials because, a top elite runner who's really good, what if they get sick on Olympic trials day and they can't do the race and then they're not selected for the team? We didn't even select our best team then. Or, it puts pressure on the top 3 to run this Olympic trials race and qualify before they run the Olympics. It might tire them out or cause injury or something like that. So, is it in the best interest for selecting the most elite team? What is the drawbacks, though, with community involvement? Your hometown hero who qualifies, opening up more benchmark goals for sub-elites who are dreaming of that next big step. Should we, make the standards as slow as 225? This is relative. As 225 and 250. Then you'd be letting in probably over 1,000 runners in each race. And so, it's up for debate. What do you guys think? Comment below. Let me know what you guys think. I definitely, I think it's fair that the men's standard at least went back down to 218 with the super shoe involvement, because I do think that is an important thing to look out with the technology. I think it's a huge influx of faster performances, and there will be a number of guys that will run under 218 for sure. Whether or not the women's standard dropped by too much and is too aggressive, that's a tougher debate. Women historically have been underrepresented in the sport. They've been discriminated against for sure. So, whether or not it's good to have maybe more numbers of women in the Olympic trials, there's definitely a point made with that. And whether 237 is too fast of a time, maybe 238 or 239 would have been more fair. That's worth examining as well. But that's just my hot take on this. Thanks so much for subscribing on here. Check out more training talks coming your way, as well as race updates. I signed up for a race next year and future goals. Hope you're doing well. And thanks to the Patreon supporters for really making this channel possible. Shout out to title sponsor Hoka One, keeping the dream alive. Hope you're doing well again, and stay tuned for more VO2 Max Productions.